The judge ordered prosecutors to provide more evidence of alleged violent activities overseas because even the judge could find no real concrete evidence for his prosecution or further imprisonment. Jose Padilla to this day remains indefinitely detained. All people should be extended the same courtesies guaranteed to us by the United States Constitution and international law. The American people must realize that surrendering civil liberties, rights, and protections will not make us safer from terrorists. It only endangers us further by allowing fascism to creep into our own government. We must remember that our founding fathers established our constitutional republic based on the knowledge that big government was the greatest purveyor of injustice against the people and our individual collective freedoms. With the passing of the Military Commissions Act of 2006, almost 800 years of international precedents to protect human rights through habeas corpus law was nullified into non-existence and replaced by a new and terrifying expansion of tyrannical executive rule. Quote, "The President can now, with the approval of Congress, indefinitely hold people without charge, take away protections against horrific abuse, put people on trial based on hearsay evidence, authorize trials that can sentence people to death based on testimony literally beaten out of the witnesses, and slam shut the courthouse door for habeas petitions," said ACLU Executive Director Anthony D. Romero. Fearing the loss of Republican power in the midterm elections, the inept and overly corrupt GOP Congress had authorized the President to establish special military tribunals to prosecute terrorist suspects accused of threatening national security. The rules permit the exclusion of a defendant from trial should secret evidence be presented in a case, and allows for conviction based on hearsay evidence or coerced statements solicited through torture. This draconian legislation also authorizes the three-officer military panel the power to determine a detainee's status as an enemy combatant and whether they are qualified for indefinite detention without the right of habeas corpus petition to challenge the legality of detention in a federal constitutional court. The law allows the President, quote, "to interpret the meaning and application of international standards for prisoner treatment, meaning that the CIA can continue their secret program of kidnapping. Rendition, relocating suspects abroad, outsourcing them to territories where the rule of law does not exist, and torture can be used unabated. There is even a war crimes immunity clause to protect interrogators from past actions which the U.S. Supreme Court in June of 2006 said violated U.S. and international law. Those that had committed such acts could have been prosecuted as war criminals for past behaviors. Interrogators had been refusing to continue the program as implemented prior to the passing of this law, but now it's business as usual, with an even greater move toward instituting new techniques, as this law also narrows the range of activities that constitute a violation of Common Article 3 of the Geneva Conventions outlawing torture by international standards. The most heinous aspect of this draconian legislation is that it expands the definition of what a detainee is to include U.S. citizens labeled as enemy combatants or domestic terrorists by Section 802 of the first USA Patriot Act, which states, quote, "Domestic terrorism means activities that involve acts dangerous to human life that are a violation of the criminal laws of the United States or any state. They appear to be intended to intimidate or coerce a civilian population, to influence the policy of a government by intimidation or coercion, or to affect the conduct of a government by mass destruction, assassination, or kidnapping, and occur primarily within the territorial jurisdiction of the United States. Anyone who offers material support to someone engaged in hostilities against the U.S. can be held indefinitely in military detention, regardless whether he or she actually engaged in hostilities, and those persons can be forced to relinquish, quote, citizenship by serving in a hostile terrorist organization. Specifically, an American could be expatriated if, with the intent to relinquish nationality, he becomes a member of or provides material support to a group that the United States has designated as a terrorist organization, if that group is engaged in hostilities against the United States, end quote. Taken into account with the broader definition of Section 504 of the Domestic Security Enhancement Act of 2003, or Patriot Act II, any violation of federal or state law can result in the enemy combatant terrorist designation, which means that regardless of being an American citizen, if designated as an enemy combatant, one can be denied habeas corpus, held indefinitely, tortured, convicted, and even sentenced to death based on traditionally non-admissible hearsay or coerced testimony, and possibly summarily executed with state secret evidence which never has to be released or revealed to public scrutiny. Quote, the establishment of the writ of habeas corpus are perhaps greater securities to liberty and republicanism than any the Constitution contains. The practice of arbitrary imprisonments have been, in all ages, the favorite and most formidable instruments of tyranny. Alexander Hamilton.
A vital element in keeping the peace is our military establishment. Our arms must be mighty, ready for instant action, so that no potential aggressor may be tempted to risk his own destruction. Our military organization today bears little relation to that known of any of my predecessors in peacetime, or indeed by the fighting men of World War II or Korea. Until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry. American makers of plowshares could, with time and as required, make swords as well. But we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. We annually spend on military security alone more than the net income of all United States corporations. Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals.